Welcome back. I want to talk about offer sheets. I'm going to go through the history of offer sheets. I didn't include the dollar amount. I didn't include the date because it just becomes kind of a mess. I want to get into what's matched and what's not. What the compensation was, and as a fan who watched all of this take place, I mean, it was a lot of fun to see what Ron Caron was going to do next. So I'm wearing St. Louis because, honestly, the amount of Blues magnets I needed for this one, it's a lot. This is two boards, too. There's a second board right behind this one. So, yeah, if you're wondering, why does it end with Grattan? Well, it ends with Grattan because I ran out of boardroom, and now there's ones on the back as well. I was hoping I could get all the ones done before the salary cap era all onto one board, but didn't quite fit. So the first ever offer sheet, Gary Nyland. So that's your answer to a trivia question. The first offer sheet was Gary Nyland. And Chicago makes the offer. He belonged to the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs accept, or the offer sheet's accepted, meaning Toronto doesn't match. And the compensation was determined to be Ken Yaremchuk, Jerome Dupont, and a 1987 fourth. So it is an independent arbitrator who can decide whatever. And that's the danger at this stage, is that it could be anything. You really didn't know what you might lose, what you might gain. Jeff Courtnall, next one. The Oilers had Jeff Courtnall's rights. The Rangers made an offer to the restricted free agent. Now, the Oilers matched it, but they didn't. What they did was they actually traded to the Capitals, who matched that offer. So the Oilers still lose the player, but they get something back in a trade from the Capitals, and then the Capitals matched the offer, so they kept Jeff Courtnall. So the Rangers got shut out on that one. Scott Stevens, here's the big one. Here's the one that was seismic in what it did to the NHL. The Washington Capitals defenseman Scott Stevens, on his way to a Hall of Fame career, he is offered a sheet by Ron Caron, whose madness is about to begin. He is involved a lot. And it ends up working out that Scott Stevens joins the Blues. It's an amount of money that the Capitals just look at and say no. The Capitals get back 5 first-round draft picks. 5 of them in exchange for Stevens. And the Blues are willing to give up those draft picks because they're getting Scott Stevens. So, keep that in mind. Dave Christian, Boston Bruin, St. Louis, makes him an offer. It ends up being dropped. The Boston Bruins claimed he wasn't actually a free agent, and it was tampering. So it ends up being dropped, and Boston ends up moving the player. So very often when a team matches or whatever happens, very often the player ends up moving on anyways, at least during this era. And then also, the Bruins then made offers to Glenn Featherstone and Dave Tomlinson, and then Dave Christian's awarded as the compensation along with a 1992 third. So basically St. Louis is like, fine, we get Christian this way, you get Featherstone and Tomlinson, we also get a third. Everybody's happy, except Boston, because Featherstone and Tomlinson never really worked out. Now, here comes Ron Caron again. So Ron Caron's involved in all this. Brendan Shanahan, restricted free agent, New Jersey Devils. So he makes an offer. Devils are like, we're not giving Shanahan that much money. So it's accepted. Guess what an arbitrator awards to the New Jersey Devils? Scott Stevens. It's 1 year later. They still owe 4 first-round picks to the Washington Capitals, and now Ron Caron doesn't have the player that he acquired for all those first-round draft picks, who only spent 1 year in St. Louis, because he is awarded to the New Jersey Devils. And there you go. Absolutely bonkers. This was the most crazy. If there'd been an internet, that would have broken it back then. And it may have been in its infancy, but it wasn't the internet we know today. Michel Goulet then, Chicago Blackhawks. St. Louis makes the offer because Ron Caron's crazy. And it's matched. Then Ron Caron must have had a nap because Adam Graves was a restricted free agent, and the Rangers. The Rangers make that offer. It's accepted, but what's the player going the other way as compensation is Troy Millette. So I'm going to go ahead and say the Rangers were really happy with that deal in retrospect. Of course, Adam Graves goes on, wins the Stanley Cup with the Rangers. Troy Millette did not do the same with the Oilers. Kevin Stevens was given an offer sheet by the Boston Bruins while he's a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Penguins rightfully matched it. Kevin Stevens ends up going to Boston later. Boston guy, born in Massachusetts, but his best games were played in Pittsburgh. Dave Manson, Edmonton Oiler, offer sheet with the Washington Capitals. It's matched. And it's interesting how often Edmonton Oilers players are signing those offer sheets. And the Oilers are kind of being forced to match them. Teemu Selanne. This is one I had forgotten it took place. The Winnipeg Jets had his rights. Calgary gave him an offer sheet. So the Winnipeg Jets match it. They would end up trading him to the Anaheim Mighty Ducks. So, yeah, Calgary tried to scoop Selanne out of Winnipeg. That would have been another seismic move had that taken place. Now, Craig Simpson, he signs an offer sheet with the San Jose Sharks out of Edmonton. It's ruled that contract, the way it's structured, is invalid. And then then it comes out that he's thinking about signing one with Buffalo, so the Oilers just trade him to Buffalo before he can sign another offer sheet. So the Oilers, this is a problem they have. They don't really have the money. Other GMs know it, and if they can poach a player, they will. Then Kelly Miller of the Washington Capitals is given an offer sheet by the San Jose Sharks, which is matched. Marty McSorley, LA Kings, given an offer sheet by the St. Louis Blues. It is matched. Not swayed by that, the St. Louis Blues give an offer sheet to Peter Nedved, who was in the midst of a major contract holdout with the Vancouver Canucks. He was never playing in Vancouver again. So it's accepted, and then Craig Janney was the award, and along with the 1994 second, but Craig Janney refused to report to Vancouver. And I think he ruled himself out as ever being a fan favorite with anybody in Vancouver ever again, if he had ever been in the first place. But then he's traded back to St. Louis in exchange for Jeff Brown, Brett Hedican, and Nathan Lafayette. And it helps Vancouver get to the Stanley Cup final. So, again, appreciate St. Louis a lot at that point because they'd already given them Courtnall, Ronning, Dirk Momesso. It's like, all right, just keep throwing his players. Made Vancouver a much better team. This is where it gets really interesting. So 1994, St. Louis tries to do it again with Scott Stevens. Yeah. They try another offer sheet with Scott Stevens. It's matched, but the Blues would later. There's an investigation into this. The Blues were ruled to have tampered with Scott Stevens, so they lost $1.425 million and another first-round draft pick for tampering. They gave up 6 first-round draft picks to try to get Scott Stevens. He spent 1 year in St. Louis. That's absolutely insane. Mike Craig, Dallas Star. He was offer sheeted by Toronto. And it is surprising that Toronto doesn't really go the offer sheet route. This is before the salary cap. This is when you give guys whatever you want. And Toronto, a team that makes money, by the barrelful. It's accepted. And Peter Zezel and Grant Marshall are going to Dallas as a result of Mike Craig going to Toronto. Stephen Rice, Edmonton Oilers, was given an offer sheet by the Hartford Whalers. It was accepted, and Brian Marchment is going back to the Edmonton Oilers in response. So they had matched on Manson, and then they picked up Marchment. That's a pretty tough blue line. Then we have Stephen Rice. Oh, Stephen Rice is the one I just did. Shane Corson. I get confused because I'm not talking about Blues. I'm like, what am I doing? Anyway, but we're back to the Blues. The Edmonton Oilers... offer sheet for Shane Corson from the Blues. Because sure, why not? Just keep going. Come on, Ron Caron, keep going. And it's accepted. And in exchange, the Oilers get a 1996 and 1997 first-round pick. Those are traded back to St. Louis in exchange for Curtis Joseph and Mike Greer. So St. Louis gets Corson, loses first-round picks, ends up losing Cujo. I'm going to go ahead and say St. Louis in this era was run in a way that may not have led to great success. That their lack of winning a Stanley Cup may have been this, it's almost like an ADHD way of running things. And there is some semblance to me for the way that things go with Vegas, where Vegas keeps getting those shiny new object players, right? Okay, we got Stone, and we got Pietrangelo, and all these other, star players coming in. And I will see whether or not the end result for Vegas is a Stanley Cup, because for St. Louis, they just weren't able to get over that hump. Stu Grimson was given an offer sheet by the New York Rangers while he was a Detroit Red Wing. That's matched. Keith Tkachuk, while he's a Winnipeg Jet, given an offer sheet by Chicago. This is an American team looking and going, I don't think Winnipeg can match this offer. Winnipeg's a team that may be losing some money here, and so we make an offer sheet high enough they may not match it. But it was matched. Ron Tugnut Washington Capitals was given an offer sheet by Ottawa, and it's accepted. Too little money for compensation. Going the other way. Joe Sakic, this is a famous one. Famous one in that the New York Rangers threw so much money at Joe Sakic to leave Colorado, and he signs it, but Colorado did match. Gritted teeth, not happy with the contract, but they signed it, and Sakic stays in New York. And offer sheets absolutely end up giving guys more money than they probably deserve. But that's part of the reason you throw an offer sheet. You want the player. You want the player bad enough that you're probably going to overpay to get him. And you want that money to be something that the other team isn't going to want to pay. So that was the idea with Sakic, but Colorado did match. Chris Gratton. I did a video on this not too long ago. Tampa Bay lost him to Philadelphia on an offer sheet, which was accepted. It was an absolute mess, however, but because they tried to trade him while the offer sheet's coming through, it's a mess. So they get 4 firsts in exchange, which were then all traded back to Tampa Bay. So yeah, Chris Gratton, 4 first-round draft picks, going to Tampa from Philly, and they were all traded back to Philly in a deal with Renberg, and then eventually. They undo the whole thing. Gratton goes back to Tampa. Renberg goes back to Philly, and they never speak of it again. So yeah, kind of weird. And now I need to change boards. How long has it been since I said now I need to change boards? It's been a while, right? All right, Matthias Oland, the Vancouver Canucks. Toronto gave him an offer sheet. Vancouver matched it immediately. At least as I remember it, they matched it pretty quick. They weren't going to lose Matthias Oland. Sergei Fedorov. This was a big one. This was one that ticked off the Red Wings mightily. Fedorov ends up making, I think they said like $28 or $24 million the first 12 months after he signed this contract. Carolina wanted to make this a poison pill. This is the last one before the salary cap era too. They wanted to make sure that this was a contract Detroit would not match. They desperately wanted Fedorov. So it was front loaded. First off, it's just we're throwing him a bunch of money. Plus, if he made the conference finals, there's a $12 million bonus. $12 million bonus for making the conference finals for a deal Carolina signs. Well, if he signs in Detroit, the odds of being in a conference final, very high. In Carolina, very low. So it's made to punish Detroit for matching it. And it's one of those contracts that if you tried to sign that now, the NHL would immediately say no. Gary Bettman would be like, that's no. That clause, you have to take that out of there. That's not right. Detroit matches it, and Fedorov makes a lot of money. And this is what happens without a salary cap. You can throw a lot of money at a player. You don't have to worry about a salary cap. You don't have to worry about any of that. You're just trying to steal them from another team. So there's very few players of note that actually we see awarded to another team without the team that gets the big name ending up having to pay a steep price going the other way, right? Adam Graves, though, not a big steep price there. So we get to the salary cap era. Ryan Kessler was signed to an offer sheet by Philadelphia, and I remember there being some debate in Canuck fandom about whether or not the Canucks should match, and they did. And it was a good thing they did because Kessler took that next step the following season. And it was a risky move by Philadelphia at the time. It ends up being a contract that's a huge bargain. Thomas Vanek. The Oilers tried to poach Thomas Vanek out of Buffalo. Buffalo matches. It is a big money contract. Vanek, for the rest of that contract, he's not worth this amount of money. Edmonton knew that at the time. They were trying to steal him out of Buffalo. So they end up stealing Dustin Penner instead out of Anaheim, which made Brian Burke very unhappy. Burke was not happy with the fact that Kevin Lowe was throwing money around on offer sheets. Now, in exchange, the 2008 first round, second round, and third round picks from the Oilers go to Anaheim. So it's a good deal for Anaheim, really. Three draft picks for Dustin Penner, but he's still not happy. Then the Canucks did something that, this is Mike Gillis era too, right? David Backes was signed to an offer sheet by the Canucks from St. Louis. Now, what threw me off with that at the time was it was for $2.5 million a year, so $7.5 million over 3 years. At the time, Backes is young; he's a star on the way. So of course, St. Louis is going to match. There was never any doubt St. Louis was going to match. So St. Louis probably kind of ticked at the whole thing. They then answer with a retaliation strike. Steve Bernier is given an offer sheet by the Blues, one that at the time I said the Canucks should just let him go. But the Canucks did match the Bernier offer sheet. It was, and again, this is why when people talk about, oh, you should just throw an offer sheet. Not necessarily, because that retaliation is always out there, right? So Nick Hjalmarsson is given an offer sheet by San Jose from Chicago. San Jose looking at the cap situation going, hey, we'll offer Hjalmarsson enough money that it's going to be tough for Chicago to match. So it's not always about finding a dollar value that works for the player. Sometimes it's about a dollar value that the other team can't match. So maybe he's not worth this amount of money, but we get him and the other team loses him because they can't afford to match. And if they do, they're going to have to hurt the rest of their team. So it was done with that in mind. Much like Nashville, when Shay Weber was up and Philadelphia gave him this massive deal that's still on the books. Huge long-term deal. And just lots of cash being thrown at him by Philadelphia because they wanted to steal him out of Nashville. So when Nashville matched, that contract became kind of a weight. And so eventually they traded him to Montreal for PK Subban to get out from under that contract. And there's still the recapture penalty to Nashville if he were to retire. Even though it's Philadelphia that initially signs that contract, and all Nashville did was match it so they wouldn't lose the player. And it is interesting to see some of these contracts that get bought out later and people talk about. And in some cases, they're contracts that came via the offer sheet. Ryan O'Reilly, this is the one that I chuckle about when I think about it, which is that Calgary signs Ryan O'Reilly out of Colorado. Colorado matched. It was a good thing because Calgary didn't do their homework on this one. He would have had to clear waivers before joining the Flames. Did not have to clear waivers before joining Colorado because they had his rights before. But before going to Colorado, he had played in Europe. He would have had to clear waivers. There's no chance Ryan O'Reilly would have cleared waivers. So Calgary would have had to give up whatever compensation to Colorado for taking the player, and then they would have got nothing because he would have been gone on waivers. So that's what happens if you don't do your homework on all this. And it was a lucky thing that Ryan O'Reilly gets the match from Colorado, that they said, yeah, fine, we'll just match that. But of course, it is interesting to see a number of these players end up moving on after signing those contracts, right? Sebastian Ajo, one of the more recent ones, of course, Carolina. Montreal gave him a lot of money up front, big bonuses. They wanted to make it a poison pill so Carolina could not match. Not only that, but they signed him to a contract that gets him to unrestricted free agency. So it doesn't buy him any unrestricted free agent years, which is big. It gives him a lot of cash up front, and it made it so that Carolina, a team that they know doesn't have the kind of money that Montreal does, it'd be tough for them to match. But Carolina matched, and I think they made the decision immediately to match. I don't think there was ever any discussion about not matching, but clearly they have a memory regarding this. Because as I'm recording this, we are into just past, around the 24-hour mark now since Jesperi Kotkaniemi signs an offer sheet with Carolina for $6,100,035. And 35, well, Aho's drafted 35th overall. $20 signing bonus. Ajo wears the number 20. And of course, 20 plus 15 equal 35. He was drafted in 2015. So there's a lot here. And there are people mad at what Carolina's done here and said this is very, schoolyard kind of thing, and this is very immature, and this is what a crappy organization to do this. Carolina's had a lot of success in the last few years. And so it definitely feels like they looked and said, we want the player. How I view it is this: they want Kotkaniemi. You're not going to sign him to the offer sheet if you don't. And if you've had conversations with him, odds are you may know. Kotkaniemi, not all that happy in Montreal. They tried to work out a trade first. Montreal, the asking price is too high, so you sign him to the offer sheet. You make it a higher value than what Montreal wants to pay, which most of these offer sheets are. You are offering the player more than the team wants to pay him, because otherwise the player would have signed that agreement with the team. So you have to be offering more. You might be offering more term. In this case, Kotkaniemi's only getting a year. So it's just a matter of, we want this player at this price. The compensation is a first, a second, and a third. Or first and a third, sorry. It's a first and a third if Montreal doesn't match. And what Carolina's betting on is that with Kotkaniemi, they're a better team. And that first round pick is in like the mid-20s. The third round pick is, in the 70s range. Like it's not, no, third round, So 60 being like the 80 to 90 range, right? Or ideally, you want that first round pick to be number 32 overall, meaning you won the Stanley Cup. So for Montreal, they have to weigh that. They have to say, okay, so 6.1 million for Kotkaniemi is high. They're already going to be having cap issues as it is. And I know Weber's going in LTIR and all that, but they're already a team that's a little iffy with the cap, and 6.1 million for Kotkaniemi could throw everything out of whack. There's no way they wanted to spend. I would estimate it's probably like 2.5 million they wanted to spend on Kotkaniemi, maybe 3, probably a 1 or a 2 year deal. But this throws everything off, and that's the plan. That's what Carolina's plan is: steal the player. And yes, there's definitely some we want to get revenge for the whole Ajo thing. And again, this is why when people talk about, well, why aren't all these offer sheets coming out? Because this is what can happen. You can get that retaliatory strike, and it means that GMs are shy about giving out offer sheets. That's the way it works in the National Hockey League. You can see from that first board, that's over a period of maybe 10 years, 10, 12 years, that you have that whole board filled with offer sheets. Since the salary cap came in 2005, this has been it. And all of them have been matched except Dustin Penner. Dustin Penner is the only one that signed an offer sheet that actually changed teams. Everybody else, it's matched, pending the decision with Kotkaniemi. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.